new press conference. The reason why we call this press conference today is due to two disturbing statements that were said by the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, during a press conference that she held on December 1st, 2021. And I want to quote exactly what she said in order to make sure that we set the record straight and people that will be watching us will understand why we call this press conference and why we have the positions that we will have. So the first thing is, when Ursula was asked by a journalist, what is she thinking about the green certificate, the digital green certificate and the boosters? She said, and I quote, "This was a huge success," end quote. When the same journalist asked about the fact that these green certificates will be valid for 9 months, while the discussion was that actually the vaccines are valid 6 months, she said, and I quote, "There's a grace period of 3 months offered, granted by the European Commission to the people who are vaccinated to exercise their fundamental rights." So this is the first issue. Second issue, she was asked about the mandatory vaccination that we've seen right now being pushed all across Europe. And when she was asked about this, she said the following, and I quote, and the reason why I'm quoting is, again, to make sure that everything is on record and everybody will know what we'll be talking about. So she said, and I quote, "If you're asking me what my personal position is, we have this pandemic, we have to leave, we have the life-saving vaccines, but they have not been used adequately everywhere, and these cause an enormous health costs. If you look at the numbers, we have now 77% of the adults from the European Union vaccinated, or if you take the whole population, is 66%. This means 1/3 of European population is not vaccinated. There are 150 million people. This is a lot. Not each and everyone can be vaccinated. So there are very small children, for example, or people with special medical conditions. But the vast majority of people could. And therefore, I think it is understandable and appreciate to lead this discussion now. How can we encourage and potentially think about mandatory vaccination within the European Union? This needs discussion. This needs a common approach, but it is a discussion that I think has to be led, she said, end quote. So since she's asking for a discussion that should be led across the European Union, we took this privilege, I would say, and we answered her invitation to start this debate. So this is the reason why I'm calling my colleague Francesca Donata from Italy to present you her position about what the President of the Commission asked us to discuss about.
Thank you, Christian. Thank you, everybody. Good morning. I live in a country that is already implementing mandatory vaccination. In Italy, the government has introduced a mandatory vaccination for all workers in the health sector, for those in the school, university and job training sector, and for all workers in the army, police and firemen. All these workers are compelled to receive a complete vaccination against COVID-19 and booster doses to escape being placed on unpaid leave, regardless their immunity status. Having a strong natural immunity after recovery from the infection does not relieve anyone from the obligation when 6 months after the positive swab have passed. Moreover, even people with conditions that contraindicate vaccination are not exempted from the mandate, except for a few cases decided on the basis of an algorithm. Besides that, the government has just introduced an enhanced Green Pass, released only for vaccinated or recovered by 6 months, as requirement to access all restaurants, bars, cinemas, theatres and public events. It covers all people over 12 years. The basic Green Pass, instead, can be obtained even by paying COVID rapid tests, valid for 48 hours, and it's required to travel by all public transports, including local ones, to access all schools and universities, and to work in any public or private activity where vaccination is not mandatory. In my country, freedom of choice about personal medical treatments is denied, as people are blackmailed with losing their job or their freedom to travel or to study if they don't sign a consent to vaccination which is not free nor properly informed. Children over 12 now can't get on a bus and go to school if they're not vaccinated and their families can afford the cost of 3 tests a week, or don't have a car to carry them along. Many teenagers are experimenting myocarditis, pericarditis, and several are dying for sudden heart attacks, cerebral hemorrhage, or unknown reasons while sleeping, just after the jab. Now they're starting to inject children aged 5 to 11, as the EMA and the Italian Medical Agency have authorized the use of Pfizer jabs, even on them, by a decision based on a 1,500 children trial and a follow-up of a few weeks. In other European countries, the situation is similar, or even worse, like in Latvia, where unvaccinated members of the parliament are not allowed to have part in debates and to vote, or in Greece, where the government has proposed to fine with €100 every month all people over 60 if they will not get a shot. In Austria, there is a lockdown for the unvaccinated starting next week, and the draft law imposing mandatory vaccination for all people, including minors, with fines up to €7,200 or, alternatively, prison sentences up to 6 weeks for those who refuse. Last week, the President of the European Commission asked for a common approach in the EU to implement these measures in all countries. My reply is that the EU should reject all hypotheses of mandatory vaccination and discrimination of unvaccinated citizens, as the Council of Europe did in its resolution number 2361/21. On the contrary, supporting mandatory vaccinations, the EU would betray its fundamental principles and values of liberty, equality and protection of human rights. From that day on, being a member of the European Union would be a shame and a damnation for all democratic countries. Now the European Union has to make a choice. Will it keep being a democratic system or it won't? The Commission is open to turning authoritarian. We will see what the Council will decide. We are here to restore a union for freedom and human rights, not for shame. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll invite now to the floor our colleague from the Greens. He's from Lithuania, Stasys Jakialunas.
Thank you, Christian, and good morning, everyone. Now, some researchers, including medical researchers, call this pandemic PCR test pandemic. I agree with them, and I would add that this is also a pandemic of fear, because PCR tests are resulting in a number of cases, so-called COVID cases and COVID deaths, and this statistic is unreliable, confirmed by 3 statistical institutions in the European Union. Now, data, statistical data, and feeling of fear is manipulated to push all of us, including our children, into being vaccinated. Now, President von der Leyen called for mandatory, or discussion, I would be correct, for discussion on mandatory vaccination. But what we already have forced or coerced vaccination because of this manipulation of fear, data, and because of requirement to use COVID digital certificate. When asked to vaccinate, we are asked to trust in science. Now, what is science? I did some science myself years ago, but I remember what it is. First of all, it's a scientific debate, open scientific debate. Now, where is the scientific debate on vaccination and other COVID issues, including the PCR test? I don't see any. Why? Because it's blocked. It's blocked in most of the media, and it's even censored on the global scale by some global networks. Now, I was born in the USSR. Actually, I was expelled from my home country before I was born because my parents were political prisoners during the Stalinist regime, and they were sent far away from the home country. I lived in the Soviet Union prison with the censorship, with the control for 30 years. I didn't imagine that we would be moving again somehow to the environment of the censorship and to the environment of the control. I was myself censored by the global network 3 times. Why? Because I asked questions, I proposed some discussion, scientific discussion, I initiated some discussion myself, and it was blocked, it was censored. Now, Commission President von der Leyen, I don't know if she is a victim of manipulation, data and fear manipulation, or is she manipulating herself? The scientists I trust and the data I analyze don't indicate that we need a vaccination for all, especially for children and young adults up to 50 years of age. There is no risk from this virus on a statistical basis to these age groups. Now, this censorship is quite dangerous because it's creeping into us, and if it continues to happen, I think we'll be living in something. We can call it global China, we can call it global Soviet Union, or we can call it global digital COVID land. Doesn't matter how we call it, but it's not a free world anymore. So we have to fight for the free world. We have to fight for our right to live in the free world and for our children's right to live in the free world. Thank you.
Thank you, Stasis. Christine?
Yes, good morning. Thanks again to all of you for your overwhelming support and encouragement you expressed to us in uncounted emails, private messages on social media. But please, do not consider me a hero. I'm not brave and I'm not courageous. I am simply doing my job. I was elected to Parliament to serve the people, to act on their behalf and in their best interest. And I couldn't think of a better way to serve your interest than to uphold freedom, democracy, and the rule of law. But I'm telling you, the vast majority of the elected representatives, they are selling you down the river. You know, instead of adjusting our concept of what constitutes fully vaxxed, we need to adjust our concept of what constitutes legitimate government. And governments forcing people into compliance are neither legitimate nor democratic by any stretch of the imagination. And it isn't about your health either. You know, pharmaceutical companies are about as interested in public health as the arms industry is in world peace. Now, some of you may argue I'm exaggerating. I'm misjudging the government's intentions. Granted, that is a possibility. But are you willing to take that risk? Can you afford this nonchalant attitude towards government, considering what we all stand to lose? Others may think, yeah, I kind of see where she's coming from, but nah, my government wouldn't do it. Well, not only would they, I'm telling you, they are already doing it as we speak. As Heraclit, a Greek philosopher living in the 5th century BC, once said, "The truth often evades being recognized due to its utter incredibility." So just because you cannot fathom your government having ill meanings towards you doesn't mean it is not true. And on the other hand, I'd much rather be wrong than sorry. But it's up to you. You need to decide what you will do. But keep in mind, whatever decision you do make, you will not only make it for yourself. This decision will be made for your children and your children's children as well. Your decision today will shape the society your children will have to live in. Your decision today will predetermine whether your children will live in a free and democratic society or if they will be subjected to a surveillancing police state. Now, I am determined to leave my children a free and democratic society, and this I will fight for tooth and nail. And should it be the last thing I do on this planet, so be it. So once again, dear government, bring it on. Let's see what you've got. I am not afraid of you. You will not be able to shut me up. You will not be able to force me into compliance. Oh, and one other thing, trying to buy me off, really? That isn't going to work either. So go ahead, offer me $1 million. Heck, make it $100 million. But you know what? Securing a future for my children in a free and democratic society, you could not possibly put a price tag on that. So when it comes to my stand on that issue, I would like to put it in the words of Margaret Thatcher. This lady is not for turning. You can bet on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Ivan?
Thank you. Thank you, dear colleagues. Thank you all for attending this press conference. In the beginning, I will reply to President of the Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, who called for a debate on mandatory vaccination. The answer is simple: no, you cannot mandate these medical products. And why you cannot mandate these medical products? Because data and science have shown us that these products are very far away from what was promised. I will repeat it over and over again. On 25th of February, here in Brussels, in European Parliament, there was a committee and 7 directors, CEOs from major pharmaceutical companies, from Moderna and AstraZeneca to Pfizer and Mand.Vax, were there. And we, as MEPs, had the right to ask them questions about their medical products. And they said it had extreme efficiency, 90, 95%, all those high percentages. And 9 months later, what we see in the data, what science and statistics shows us, it shows us that the efficiency is far less than it was promised. This is the benefit. The efficiency is the benefit. And there are also costs to the benefit. What are the costs? The costs are also, of course, side effects. Every product has its side effects. So what does the science tell us about side effects? That there are more reported side effects, adverse reactions to these COVID vaccines than all the other vaccines combined in several decades. We have products of questionable quality, and this is why you cannot mandate them. You cannot mandate them. And when it comes to freedom, more and more I feel that our constitutional rights and our human rights have been kidnapped, and that we have to pay ransom every 6 months, 1 year. We have to pay ransom to get our freedoms back. This is simply unacceptable. Our rights are unalienable. That means that no kidnapper can take them from us. It's as simple as that. And we accept nothing else. I will make a short report on Croatia and Slovenia. As you know, as I said on a previous conference, with the beginning of November, Croatian government decided that public sector must have digital green certificates implemented. As soon as this measure was started to get implemented, huge resistance was offered on all levels, and it still is there, and it continues to rise. So now it will be tomorrow. Tomorrow in Croatian Parliament there will be a debate on a law that will make fines for all those who do not implement DGC in their institution, in their organization. So the Croatian government goes further with this repression, with this unconstitutional situation. And of course, if von der Leyen tells them, implement mandatory vaccination to Croatia, of course they will do it. And they have always done whatever Brussels told them, no matter how illogical it was. So Ms. von der Leyen said that DGCs were a huge success. Well, this huge success was declared unconstitutional by the Constitutional Court of Slovenia just a few days ago. The Constitutional Court of Slovenia, and I have to emphasize this because, as my colleague said, there is a lot of censorship and information like this spread very slowly, so I will make a special address on this here. So the Constitutional Court of Slovenia made a decision, made a ruling that the decision made by the government, which was, by the way, suspended up to a few days ago, that the decision made by the government of Slovenia that only the vaccinated and people who have recovered can come to their job, to their workplace, that the decision by the government is unconstitutional. So it's a huge victory for constitutional rights all over Europe, and this is one of the many court rulings on different levels, constitutional, lower levels, Supreme Courts, etc. And we need much more rulings like this. So this is a clear confirmation that the laws are still in power, human rights are still in power, but you have to fight. You have to submit a lawsuit, and you have to fight on this legal front, on activist front, on scientific front, and this is what we are doing, with what we will continue to do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ivan. One death, it's a tragedy. 1 million deaths, it's statistics. This is a quote attributed to Joseph Stalin. Now, when I was reading the quote of Ursula von der Leyen, of what she said in that press conference on December 1st, 2021, from the stage of the European Commission, where she said, and I restate it, there are 150 million people in Europe who are not vaccinated. I was completely shocked. See, when we look at the citizens of the European Union, we see not 150 million people who are vaccinated and the others who might be vaccinated. We look at 400 million individuals, persons with basic fundamental rights, which have the right and the liberty, or should have at least, in the current European Union, to decide if they want to get a medical treatment or not. So this press conference of the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, it's a turning point for the Western civilization in the European Union. When we talk about the Western civilization, we don't talk about a geographical place. We are talking about a set of values that created what we call today Occident or Western world, that everybody is referring to, that a lot of billions of people from around the world are trying to get here. This is the reason why we have the issue of the illegal immigration all over the place. Because this is the only place in the world that created and creates prosperity for people. And the reason why it's doing that is because it's accepting every person. And it is acknowledging these basic fundamental rights that we all have. This is the reason why people are not trying to run in China or in Russia, where you see dictatorships and tyrants. People from there are trying to come here because they are pursuing freedom. So what we heard on December 1st. This is changing. It's a game changer for everything related to the European Union. We've seen in the past 2 years and a half, since the current president of the Commission is leading the European Union, unbelievable attacks to the sovereignty of the member states of the European Union. But what we've seen now, and this is unprecedented, she's questioning, this is the problem, and I repeat, she is questioning the basic fundamental rights of every citizen, of every human being living inside of the European Union. Because if she's raising the issue, let's talk about the mandatory vaccine. Let's have a discussion. Discussion about what? About forcing people to do something against their will, or to accept their freedom of choice. And as it is done always in these EU institutions, everything is a compromise. We've been part of the debates in the parliament. Everything that people say here, everything that majority of the people vote, is not a matter of right or wrong. No, let's have a compromise. What I'm asking the European citizens, where do you draw the line? Where do you compromise? How much of that power you want to give to the European Commission, to unelected bureaucrats, to decide against your will what to be vaccinated with in order to live a free citizen, if you can call it that way, as Ivan said. So what she's doing right now, it is an attack to even the existence of the European Union. Because if you go in the Treaty of the European Union, Article 3 says the following, and I quote, "The Union shall offer its citizens an area of freedom, security, and justice." Freedom is not an abstract concept. Freedom, liberty, it's individual. It's personal. The government cannot say, well, you have the choices between A and B. No, I want to be the one making those choices. You have to create for me an environment where I can exercise my right to choose. It's not you giving me options. It's me choosing my own options. So for us, it was mind-boggling to hear, even from the highest level in the EU, Ursula von der Leyen coming publicly and say, well, let's have a debate about it. Debate about stripping the basic fundamental rights of all the human beings living inside of the European Union. There's another article in the Treaty of the European Union, Article 6, that says the following, and I quote, "The Union recognizes the rights, freedom, and principles set out in the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union." And here's the first page of that charter. The first article is talking about human dignity. You see, it's not talking about the state. It's not talking about the Commission, about the Parliament, or the Council. The first article of this charter is emphasizing the role of human dignity and says human dignity is inviolable. It must be respected and protected. Article 2 is talking about the right of life. But Article 3, it says the following, and I quote, "Everyone has the right to respect for his or her physical and mental integrity. In the fields of medicine or biology, the following must be respected in particular: the free and informed consent of the person concerned according to the procedures laid down by the law." And I repeat that. The free and informed consent of the person. These are the basic values, the fundamental values that are the foundation of the European Union. Now, if she is challenging the foundation of this union, which was not based on institutions or governments, it was based on creating, as the treaty says, an area for its citizens, an area of freedom, security, and justice. Well, how can you have justice? How can you have security anymore if you are violating the basic fundamental rights of the EU citizens? I heard and I saw articles in the media saying, well, you know, some people from the right are contesting this. Look at us. I'm from the, let's say, the right side of the parliament. Christine is from the right. Francesca and Ivan are from the non-affiliate. But the sis is from the left, Greens. See, it's not a matter of right or left. It's a matter of right and wrong. And clearly Ursula von der Leyen, what she's doing right now, is wrong for the European Union, and it is wrong for the people living inside of the European Union. The reason why we wanted to have this first press conference about what she said is just to raise these issues, and we can guarantee you that this will not be the last one in regards to this. And before I close, I want to say a few more things. This Sunday, I was present at a huge protest that took place here in Brussels. March for Freedom. Over 120,000 people, according to many people who counted everybody who was present there, participated at this meeting. I want to congratulate and thank everybody who participated at this meeting. Many people came from far away from Belgium and even from outside of Belgium. They came here in Brussels to march for freedom. These people wanted to be free. They want to make their own choices. I met in that group people who were not vaccinated, but I met people who were vaccinated. And I asked them, why are you protesting? Because I want to be free. I want to make my own choice. I don't want the government, the commission, or anybody else, especially unelected bureaucrats, to force me, to coerce me to do one thing or another. Nevertheless, I want to thank the firefighters who led the huge crowd. They've done an outstanding job. And unfortunately, they were met with water cannons in front of the European Commission. What shocked me when I got there, the European Commission was surrounded by barbed wires. So it was the Commission, a line of police officers, geared up for war, a barbed wire, and the people. We haven't seen this kind of images in the European Union. Us, that are from the East, we've seen it before, but not here. And since this will be the last press conference for this year, I want to tell all of you guys, do not be afraid. We are here to fight for you. Merry Christmas, and God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Could I ask any of the journalists here on who are watching? I can see a few watching. So any America Hernandez from Politico, you're asking, is a recording available afterwards? Yes, there will be. If any of the journalists watching now would like to ask a question, I think you have to press. Sorry, we'll just take one from the audience here first. So if you could just state your name, please, and your media organisation, and then bang away. Thank you.
Good morning, Vincenzo Genovese from the Italian newspaper L'Inchiesta. I was not here for the first part of this press conference, so sorry if I ask something that has already been said. After the decision of the Court of European Justice on the mandatory COVID pass to enter the Parliament, what is your next step, your next practical step? First question, and second, if I may, are you aware that if there are some colleagues, some other MEPs that basically agree with your line but are afraid to tell openly because they don't want to break the lines of their respective political families? Thank you very much.
What I want to say is I was not part of that case, so I invite any of my colleagues to answer that question.
Yes, I can say something about that. So, yeah, the court actually ruled in a preliminary ruling that Sassoli's provisions basically forbidding us to come into the parliament unless we had a digital green certificate or subjected ourselves to a PCR test, which is only valid for 48 hours, I believe. This is a no-go. So. What he instead did was that we have to take upon it, before we enter Parliament, a rapid test and in case it's negative, we get some paper stating that all is fine. And this too is, I think, valid for like 48 hours. But this is not the point. We're not really talking about, how do we get into parliament, even though I would have never guessed that, one day I will actually be faced with a problem of getting to my office where I was elected to do my work. And the German people have a right that I, do my work. But it's not really about us. It's about the people all over Europe and all over the world, for that matter. The government overreach when it comes to that. That is incredible. I mean, and we really need to think, what kind of society do we want? I mean, just think about the 2G rule. I mean, what does it actually say? The stores, grocery stores, shops, they might as well put out a sign, unvaccinated people will not be served here. Or, well, haven't we heard or seen that before under another pretext? So I'm very sorry. This discussion is about freedom, democracy, the rule of law, and basically the way of life we have known for the past decades. And they stand to be abolished now under the pretense of only doing it for our own good. Thank you.
Francesca, yes, sure.
And now,
I can add something about this issue. The General Court rejected the suspension request, and now we are evaluating with our legal lawyers if whether to go to the upper court. So we will decide about that, because the decision involves just the suspension, not the main issue. That the court has accepted to decide with an emergency rule, accelerated proceeding. So probably the main decision will come out by next summer. And now we're discussing among ourselves how to behave. According to answering to your second question, yes, we do think, and we really know there are several MEPs that agree with us, that are concerned as well as we are about these issues of violating of democracy and freedom of choice. But of course, their groups sometimes have very strict political lines, and so they can't expressly and publicly say what they think. But we are supported by them too. That's my answer. Thanks.
Thank you. I just want to add something. As far as your first question, I was not part of any of those cases. But since November 3rd, when the European Parliament implemented the decision of the Bureau to condition the exercise of our mandate as elected by the people for the people, and to exercise that mandate inside of this building in Brussels or the one in Strasbourg or Luxembourg, I never ever complied with that decision. Every time when I enter the parliament, I enter without showing anything. I always have to argue my rights with the security guards. There's a common understanding already. And they always have to write a report about me to the president of the parliament. I just received a letter a few days ago that he's preparing to punish me. That's what he said, for not complying with that decision. Well, I'm coming from a former communist country. I'm coming from a family that was persecuted politically and religiously. I don't bow and I don't kneel, only in front of God. So if they want to punish me for exercising my right and for defending the freedoms of all in EU, let's do it. But at the end of the day, and this is regarding to your second question, at the end of the day, it's up to the European citizens. What do they want to do? Yes, there are plenty of MEPs in this building who are supporting us. Some of them are afraid of the groups, some of them are pressured. But the basic line is this: it's up to the EU citizens. So if any of you guys from EU are watching us, get in touch, your MEP, and tell your elected officials, your elected members of the parliament from your own countries, to come and support, not us, to support your rights, because that's the reason why they were elected here. Thank you.
Would you like the follow-up question?
Just a clarification. If you are now obliged to present a PCR test taken not before 48 hours before entering or not? I mean, you can enter the parliament without showing anything or not?
Is the question addressed to me or to my colleague?
Christian.
To Mrs. Anderson, because she talked about the PCR test, because as I can see, if you have to show a PCR test taken 48 hours, it's basically the same thing as showing a COVID pass. Thank you.
Okay, so this is the deal. There were two set of preliminary rulings of the judge, and one of them, the suspension has been lifted. But on the second ruling, the suspension is still in effect. So I do not have to comply with a PCR test, and I won't do that. I simply refuse. So what the court said, we can take a saliva rapid test, which has to be done at a pharmacy, doctor's office, or in the premises of the EU Parliament, and that's what I'm basically doing. Up until that point of the suspension by the court, I basically entered Parliament. I just provided some piece of paper that stated that I had taken a test and it was negative. And because the point of the matter is the security guards, they really were left alone in this. They had no clue how to enforce that rule. And as Christian said, they can't do anything. So if we say, well, fine, you cannot stop me from going to my office, that is absolutely true. They cannot do anything. The only thing they can actually do is what also Christian already said, that President Sassoli is now punishing us. Well, go ahead. He will not stop me from exercising my mandate in the way I see fit. That's all I have to say about that. Thank you.
Okay, are you happy? Okay. Any questions from journalists watching online? I see Mr. Hernandez from Politico, but you just want the... if you could press the yellow button for any more questions for journalists online, please. Okay, just... Okay, everybody, thank you very much. My name is Herman Kelly, and on behalf of the MEPs present here, I'd like to thank you for coming here today and for logging in online to follow the press conference. Let's have it for freedom. Thank you very much.
Thank you.